Ladies and gentlemen, maitawasali madali tamba zona mesa from Atauru. Before I invite back Dr. Vincent Pierre-Yvon, please let's watch together a remark by a researcher from Ocean X, Mr. Gustav Pauli.
I'm Gustav Pauli. I'm curator of invertebrates at the Florida Museum of Natural History at the University of Florida. And I specialize on documenting marine biodiversity, especially in the tropics and especially in the Indo-Pacific, West Pacific region. And I have been doing large-scale biodiversity surveys for many decades, several decades. And I was very excited to be able to join in the Timor-Leste mission last November that OceanX offered, and was able to bring a team with Francesca Benzoni to really explore the diversity of marine life in the region. Conservation hinges on knowing what's there, right? You conserve what you love, and you love what you know. So showing off, engaging people to see biodiversity, healthy systems is the foundation of all conservation. And images, and obviously diving on the system is the best way to do that. So there is a real move in Timor to educate young people in diving. More people are engaged in looking at the ocean. These kinds of resources and information will further accelerate access to that knowledge. And I think once people see what they have, it will be just really natural for them to care even more about it and conserve them even better than they have so far. Biodiversity is the foundation of the biosphere. All the environments that are natural are driven by biodiversity. Biodiversity is also the greatest resource that Timor-Leste has. It's exceptional. So when you think about it that way, knowing it is basically the fundamentals of understanding your planet. So it may seem like we don't need to know every worm and crab on the reef, and we probably don't for many purposes, but overall, if that's your greatest asset, you really want to understand it well. And to understand how the ecosystem functions, how the reef systems persist, we really need to understand the players involved. The reefs don't exist in a vacuum. They live off of the little things. For example, a very interesting way to think about it is you think of reef fish as the great visible thing, and the corals as a great visible thing. But the larvae of the fish, the little fish that come back to the reef that a lot of the reef feeds on, most of those larvae actually come from little tiny fishes that reside within the reef that you never see. So this was discovered fairly recently. So really understanding what lives within the reef is essential for understanding how a reef can exist. Timor-Leste lies in the Coral Triangle, which is the most diverse part of the ocean. That area is really renowned for its tremendous diversity, and unfortunately it's fairly poorly known. The greatest surprise to me was, obviously the diversity was mind-boggling. When you work on diversity, seeing great diversity is really the greatest reward of all. But the other thing that was really surprising and very, very encouraging is how good a shape the environment and the diversity were in this day and age. In the present day, environmental degradation is huge everywhere in the world, including the oceans, and global warming in particular has decimated coral reefs everywhere, including in the Coral Triangle. And yet the reefs in Timor-Leste were exceptionally healthy, and that gives one a lot of encouragement that there may be some resilience available in some parts of the world, and Timor-Leste may be one of those. So to me, really the most surprising and wonderful discovery was just the health of the system and, of course, the enormous diversity there. The 2025 expedition set a baseline for a lot of the organisms that live on the reefs and deep water of Timor-Leste. Up to that point, the marine biota of the country was documented on a very limited scale. At this stage, we now have over 1,500 species that have been photographed, taxonomically studied, and will be further studied. And this information is available online. Anybody from Timor-Leste with a cell phone can access it. And now you can start talking about the organisms that are there. But it basically allows you to have a field guide and the knowledge to the organisms that live there. The samples are taken in these biodiversity surveys to allow us to identify the organisms, to know what kind of species they are. They are all also photographed, and it's that photographic record of the live coral, the live sea star crab, that is most accessible to most people because that's the easiest way to initially identify something. So what this record does is it creates a collection that specialists from around the world will study to identify the organisms involved. Once they have identified them, the color images that we have of these organisms will serve as a field guide to anybody with reasonable knowledge of marine life to make use of this information and use it for study of the organisms, for environmental planning, for MPA design, and so forth. These conservation measures depend on recognizing the health and the diversity of the system, and that hinges on understanding the species in it. And we are creating a resource to do that on a massive scale. The baseline is essential for anything having to do with the environment. So I already mentioned that biodiversity is the greatest resource that Timor has in the long term. It comes in many formats. For example, tourism is drawn to beautiful, diverse reefs, and Timorese reefs are absolutely phenomenal. So I think if the infrastructure was there, people would flock to Timor to dive and see this. It draws science, so scientific inquiry can really build up in a place like this. Timor could become a center for biodiversity science, reef science, if it engaged with the international community. Biodiversity has economic value as resources in many ways, from food to shore protection to discovery of marine drugs and so forth. And the more you have, the more resources you have that you can potentially draw on in the future. And then finally, conservation depends on biodiversity, and conservation is essential for the future of our planet. And as many places decline, if Timor-Leste ends up remaining healthier than the average, that'd just be an amazing resource for humanity in general. The biggest question is, what else is there? So my guess is that Timor-Leste has, in the kind of marine invertebrates we've been collecting, tens of thousands of species. We barely scratched the surface with 1,500. There's a lot more to be done. By training local students, participants, naturalists, we could really build on it. And it's really a large-scale, long-term collaborative effort to build knowledge like this. I think I would love to see more training and education happening in Timor-Leste with the community of students and naturalists who would like to engage in this more in the future and keep building on what we started in November. When you study diversity, there's so much unknown in the ocean that you always find lots of new things. And we did in Timor, and some of the individual species are very memorable because I'm keen on that particular group. But the single thing that blew me away most was all the little crustaceans, little squat lobsters and shrimp and other things that live on top of corals and sea lilies and feather stars and the like, that were, one, incredibly diverse, and two, matching the color of their coral hosts, sea lily hosts, and so forth. They were totally camouflaged, blending into them. And you say, big deal. That's common. Yes, it is, but not in the deep ocean when it's totally dark. So I would just really express my deepest appreciation for the incredible welcome and facilitation we received in Timor-Leste. I went there first in February of 2025 and then returned with OceanX. Both times, the engagement with the authorities, with the resource agencies, with students, with professors at the universities has been absolutely exceptional. I've hardly been welcomed so much and had so much enthusiasm from anybody about this kind of work. And I think that attitude makes Timor-Leste really special, both personally as an amazing place to go and see friends, and also in terms of the potential that it offers. When people embrace science and embrace discovery, what we can do together is just enormous. The two greatest things that are memorable to me about the mission was the environment, right? The reefs, the shallow reefs, the deep reefs. And, I've been doing this since 1980, and I have not seen reefs like this in recent years anywhere. It's absolutely mind-boggling. And second, the attitude and the warmth of the people and their interest in this environment, and the hope that here is a community that cares, that deserves a resource like this, and I just want to help them develop it intellectually and as a conservation asset into the future.
We have heard about the importance of understanding our ocean and its conservation. In this segment, Dr. Vincent Pierribon, the CEO of Ocean X, will take us deeper into why it is important for us to understand the deep ocean and its significance to our lives, for Timor-Leste and for the world. He will also share an overview of the Ocean X marine expedition to Timor-Leste last year. Without further ado, I now invite back Dr. Pierribon for his presentation.
There we go. Okay. I'm going to try to be a little slower this time. Apologies. It was nerve-wracking. Thank you all. I think, as Gustav said, we've all been absolutely amazed and have enjoyed our time, our short time that we had here before and this time in Timor. The facilities, the people, the students have been absolutely top-notch, and that comes from an organization, Ocean X, that has been to about 100 countries in the world with our ship. And I say that in all honesty, that it's been one of the most enjoyable experiences. The ship, the crew, all of my staff have really enjoyed. And this event, I want to just say again, wow, so impressive and so well put together. Thank you to the team that built this here in Timor. So what I'm here to talk about now is the deep, and why the deep is interesting. I think probably a lot of people in Timor-Leste understand that your shallow waters are remarkably diverse, remarkably beautiful. What you may not know, and what most people in the entire world don't know, is that that beauty extends deeper into the ocean column. So we tend to picture what we can see in the ocean, what's easily, including reefs, fisheries, marine wildlife near the surface. That's what we mostly view the ocean. Physically, however, most of the ocean lies in the depth. Around 90% of the ocean's volume is considered deep ocean. And the deep seafloor covers roughly 2/3 of the planet's surface. So everything outside our coastal areas is deep water. And just to remember that the ocean is a three-dimensional ecosystem like no other ecosystem on the Earth. While the Earth tends to be two-dimensional, with only birds occupying the upper, animals occupy the entire water column. That scale matters because the deep ocean is part of a system that regulates climate, stores and cycles carbon, and supports an enormous range of biodiversity and ecological processes that are still poorly understood. Before looking specifically at Timor-Leste, it is useful to understand just how large this part of the ocean is and how little we have directly observed. Oh, good. Here we go. Okay. I'm not looking behind me. Okay. The scale of the deep ocean is matched by an equally significant knowledge gap. In 2005, the Science Advanced Studies compiled more than 4,300 deep-sea observation activities and estimated that only 0.0006 to 0.001 of the deep seafloor had been directly observed. Think about that. An incredible tiny portion of the ocean's floor has actually even been observed. Larger portions have been mapped sonographically, but that's at very low resolution. And as the old saying is, we have a lot more information on the surface of the moon, higher resolution mapping than we have of our own Earth. And that's due to the specific weirdness of water. It's difficult to see through it. Remote sensing and things like that don't work very well. Access is highly concentrated. The same analysis found that 97% of recorded dives were led by operators from only 5 countries. This means that large parts of the ocean remain poorly represented in the scientific record. For governments, this matters because decisions around conservation, marine spatial planning, and future ocean use depend on baseline information. In many deep water environments, that baseline is still to be established. Exploration establishes where habitats are, what lives there, and how those systems function before long-term decisions are made. The inception of our organization, Ocean X, was around the idea of studying the deep ocean, was around the idea of supplying a vessel like Ocean Explorer to countries like Timor-Leste to utilize that resource to study the deep ocean. Unfortunately, the deep ocean still requires the use of very sophisticated equipment to get down that deep. It's a very difficult place to observe. Pressure, temperature, and depth are significant inhibitors of us getting that deep. Humans cannot survive in the very deep ocean unprotected. We divide the ocean really between shallow, mesophotic, and deep zones because that helps us study it. But nature, however, does not. Right? Water moves between them. Organisms move between them. Food and nutrients move between them. Many animals use several depth zones in their lives, including the whales that you have out here. Right? That means the deep ocean is not a separate ecosystem underneath the one people depend on. It's part of the same system. Because we can't see it doesn't mean it's not important for our daily lives, right? Mesophotic reefs are particularly important in this connection. Mesophotic are those reefs that are in the photic zone, but just below what's generally accessible for diving, right? These deeper light-dependent reef systems can share species with shallow reefs and, under some conditions, contribute larvae and recruits that support reef recovery. The deeper reefs, the mesophotic and the deep reefs, are less susceptible currently to climate change, and they provide possibly refuge when the upper reefs are damaged. So the deep reefs here that you have in deep ocean are probably available as the shallow reefs become more endangered by climate. That's particularly important when the economic value we see most clearly, fisheries, tourism, reefs, and marine wildlife, are concentrated closer to the surface. Some of the ecological process supporting these values may extend much deeper. Timor-Leste is an especially interesting place to think about the ocean in 3 dimensions. Its highly diverse shallow reefs sit very close to steep slopes and deep water habitats. Around Futuru and the north coast, the transition from shallow to deep reef, I don't know if we have the picture, to deep reef ocean happens over a relatively short distance. At the same time, these waters are used by highly mobile species, including pygmy blue whales moving through the Wetar Strait. That means the shallow reefs, the deeper habitats, and the water column above them should not automatically be thought of as separate systems. This matters because the governments have to make decisions about marine space to protect, where to allow different usages, what to monitor, and where information is still needed. Those decisions are usually represented on a 2-dimensional map, but the ecosystem itself is 3-dimensional, from the surface all the way to the seabed. So if we want marine spatial planning or protected area design to reflect how the ocean actually functions, we need information across depth. What the seabed looks like, what the habitats are present, what species occur there, and where the major gaps in knowledge remain. The good news from the expedition we had last year is that the beauty that you all may be familiar with in your shallow reefs extends into the deep. We've been to many places around the earth where the deep reefs are much less interesting and exciting. That's why the team here that came for the first time to see this deep reef was so amazed by what's down there. Unfortunately, it's difficult for most of us to visit that part of the reef. It requires submersibles or remote-operated vehicles because humans can't dive to those depths. But we bring with us equipment to do that. Or hopefully the next time we come to this area, Prime Minister will join me in a submarine dive to the bottom of his deep waters. He's a brave man. And he will see for himself with his own eyes what otherwise would be. And we can listen to music, and we can have a coffee. Smoking, not so much in the sub, but, that's okay. Gum, we can chew gum. That is why the deep ocean exploration matters to Timor-Leste. It is not about studying some remote environment far away from people. It is about building a more complete picture of the ocean system Timor-Leste is already using, managing, and seeking to protect. Between the shores of Dili and Futuru Island, you have extremely deep water, and that cavern is where the whales travel through. And that area connects directly to the shallow reefs in your water. So we feel it's essential to think about those deep reefs and to catalog what's down there to help provide a more comprehensive plan. Now, you are not alone in the world of not having resources to study that. The majority of ships, like the one we have, which allows depth, are present in the Northern Hemisphere and are present in very few countries in the world. So the majority of countries in the Southern Hemisphere, bar a few, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and parts of South America, do not have vessels of this quality to go down and study. So that's why we provide the vessel for such operations around the world. So we designed the 2025 mission to spend as much time as possible in the deep sea, looking at these deep areas. So 4 questions shaped the mission. The mission was designed to build several layers of knowledge at the same time. First, mapping was needed to improve an understanding of the physical shape and structure of the seabed. And by mapping, what I mean is the ship has on the bottom of its hull sound transponders that send sonar signals to the bottom of the ocean. And with that, we can map a three-dimensional contour of what's down there. So many areas of the waters that we were in have not been mapped. And that's the first step in marine spatial planning, is getting a very good map of that region. Now, I know in the south of the country, south of the EZ, there's been significant mapping done in the areas where there's petroleum resources. Less has been done close to shore, in the south, east, and in the north of the country. So we covered a significant portion, I don't know, we don't have the picture, significant portion of the northern part of the reef. And we'll talk a little bit more of that as the symposium goes on. So second, the expedition documented biodiversity across shallow, mesophotic, and deep habitats. This was especially important because deeper biodiversity in the region has received limited modern scientific attention. Unfortunately, the only way to go do that is to go down and visit it. There's really no way to do it with remote sensing or robots. You have to go down into the environment and work very slowly through these vast areas. So how much of the deep of Timor-Leste did we cover on the expedition? Probably less than 1%. Right? So there's ample space and room for more investigation. Now, we use models and AI, and we'll talk a little bit more about that, to try to map these areas and predict where else in your waters we might find that type of biodiversity for protection. And finally, the mission was also the pygmy blue whales migration. And I know that there is a lot of scientific expertise, even here in the audience, around those unique animals. And I can't stress enough, and I'm sure you're already aware, how unique and special those organisms are to the world, and how important they are, and how unusual it is to have them, and how lucky and special it is to have not only those pygmy blue whales, but we saw sperm whales, we saw a variety of other cetaceans. In my lifetime, in the 10, 15 years I've been working with Ocean X, in all honesty, it was the most diverse cetacean, meaning whale-type animals, I've ever seen in my life. Yes, bravo. Oddly enough, the second place I've seen this is the Azores, another Portuguese-speaking place where there's a tremendous amount of cetaceans. But this was remarkable. From the helicopter view in that area, there were whales, there were dolphins, there was Brutus whale, all sorts of animals which we don't see that often. And enormous schools of dolphins in the water, which is a sign of a very healthy ecosystem, another sign of a healthy ecosystem. So all I can say is whatever you've been doing, it's great, keep doing it, and let's do more. Let's keep those animals around because the world loves them and needs them and wants them. And you know how valuable they are to both to the economy and to the essentially image of this. Now, they don't live here in your waters. They're passing through. But it's an important part of their track. So anything we can do to help that. And their feeding relates to upwellings and things that come from the deep water in your area. So it's essential that we continue to protect that. And we noticed that, for example, the animals are susceptible to attack by these strange little fish called cookie cutter sharks, which nobody's ever seen, but they're tiny animals that come and take little chunks out of your whales. Somewhere along the route, I don't know if it's here or where it is, but that's sort of a natural process. How that process may be changing with climate is an interesting question. We don't know that, but that's an interesting question of predation on those animals. So a key strength of the expedition was the ability to work across multiple depths and scientific disciplines on a single platform and at a single time. So the Ocean Explorer allows an opportunity to do that. So mapping came first. The ship at night will map a region, so we have a very good three-dimensional image of this area, providing a detailed picture of the seabed and helping teams identify features for closer investigation. What I might add also is a sonar system on the vessel is a fisheries sonar. Fisheries sonar, which looks at animals in the midwater. So there's a tremendous amount of data in those that EK80 sounding information, which is now in the hands of your government to take a look at. A picture of the seabed helps us identify features for closer inspection, at which point we send down ROVs and crewed manned submersibles that could then descend to those sites, observe habitats directly, and collect targeted biological samples, which was tremendous in this case. So we have a tremendous amount of video data from those dives. We have 11 cameras on the ROVs, all of which capturing that landscape. Again, all of which is available, and all of which we will be applying AI-type image discrimination on to be able to classify and identify the distribution of animals in the deep ocean. This work also extended above the surface as boats, helicopters, and drones were used to locate and observe pygmy blue whales, document behavior, and collect biological material through non-invasive methods such as SnotBot. Together, these tools allowed different data sets to be connected about the same marine ecosystem at the same time. So, a snapshot of the mission. Believe it or not, it was only 13 days long, okay, of exploration. The mission generated a substantial new amount of scientific baseline for Timor-Leste. More than 5,153 square kilometers of seafloor were mapped, approximately 70% of which had not been previously mapped to this level of detail. That mapping and data is now in the hands of the government. That mapping provided a physical context for the deeper exploration and added significant existing knowledge to the seabed. Okay? The ROV and submersible spent more than 100 hours directly observing marine habitats, giving scientists the ability to document deep communities in place and target areas for closer inspection. Sorry, I'm talking too fast. Our poor interpreter is going to yell at me. I'll go slow. Across the biodiversity work, approximately 4,400 samples were collected for further taxonomic and genetic analysis. By the way, the determination of new species and these animals are collected can take years. So a scientist will be studying this collection for probably the next 10 years and longer. These collections are being studied alongside imagery and tissue samples, creating a much more richer scientific record than specimen collection alone. And I would encourage, and this is extemporaneous on my behalf, Timor-Leste to develop, and students, this is maybe a good call out to you, develop your own national repository for the species and the organisms that live in your waters. Right now, there isn't a facility that's probably capable of receiving that many samples and maintaining them, but that should be something we should all work together to create so that the biodiversity and the learnings and the DNA and the genetic data are continuously held within the country. All the data is here, but it'd be nice to have a specimen database within the country. So I would encourage that as a future potential. Together, these outputs provide evidence base for the biodiversity, ecological, and genetic work now continuing after the expedition. So a lot of those specimens will be fully sequenced genetically, and that information will be available to scientists, academics, university professors within Timor-Leste to use to determine diversity, genetic spread, and things like that within the waters. Some of the analysis is already producing exciting observations, and I would encourage you to keep your eye on the publication stream that will come out of this expedition as time goes on. And it's just beginning. The expedition generated several different forms of scientific material, including mapping data, imagery, biological specimens, and genetic samples. Their value depends on how they are managed, accessed, and used after the field work. Full digital copies of the expedition data were provided to Timor-Leste institutions, including the Land and Maritime Boundaries Office, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Livestock, and Forestry, the National University of Timor-Leste. Mapping data remains the subject of LMBO's review before wider public release. So all that data was given to the representative institutions here in Timor-Leste. And it is essentially up to you and your responsibility about what of that data you wish to release to the public. The biological collections followed a distributed research model. Specimens have been placed with institutions that have relevant taxometric expertise, while associated imagery and records are being made accessible online. This allows specialists internationally to study the material while maintaining the links between specimens, images, and genetic information and their place of origin, Timor-Leste. That work is already supporting species identification, DNA barcoding, and genomic analysis. Over time, these resources can also strengthen the future eDNA monitoring and provide reference material for further biodiversity research in Timor-Leste. So for those of you who are not familiar with the concept of eDNA, it's a kind of modern way of assessing biodiversity over time by collecting samples of soil and water and sequencing everything in there. And as animals and creatures move through the water column, they leave DNA behind. It's like a crime scene. What it allows us to do is to study diversity in the waters without touching any organisms. But we don't know what they are if we don't have a reference genome of those organisms. So the thousands of specimens that were collected have all been sequenced and are now part of a library that can be used for future management using eDNA techniques. So when you collect water out here now, you'll find that 30 to 40% of the organisms, eukaryotic organisms, are unknown. We've reduced that by about 3,500 organisms at least up to date from the one expedition we've done. So future expeditions will hopefully increase that library of organisms that live within your water. And as Gustav said in his talk, there are literally tens of thousands of unnamed, unidentified organisms in your water at minimum. And these are larger organisms, not including smaller organisms. The mission, therefore, provides a baseline that can contribute to the growth as specimens are identified, sequences are completed, and future surveys add new information. The opportunity now is to determine which outputs are useful, what questions remain unanswered, and how future research can increasingly be shaped and undertaken with Timorese scientists and institutions. That is the really purpose of today, is to begin that. And I want to say that OceanX as an organization is committed to a continued relationship with the Timorese government, the university, and the people to help you in any way you need to build a scientific bedrock and baseline of your waters, for now and for the future. So I don't think I'm supposed to announce, but our hope is that the ship will return to these waters this year, which would be wonderful. And I would encourage everyone to come join us at the dockside, see the vessel, take a tour. I encourage the scientists to come along, and I encourage the citizens of the community to come and visit and meet the local experts, young people, who in Timor are leading the charge and will lead the protection of this will be your country and it is your country, and you will lead in the protection of it. And we encourage you to join us to see the vessel in operation when it comes back again. And let's do some things together to show off the beauty of the water and to help encourage education and protection of Timorese water. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pieribon. Our next speakers will present their findings and insights from mapping Timor-Leste's ocean environment and how this information will support the implementation of Blue Economy Initiative in Timor-Leste. Dr. Erin Heffron is the Mapping and Geospatial Coordinator for OceanX. She brings more than 20 years of experience in ocean mapping. Her expertise covers sonar data acquisition and subsea navigation, alongside geospatial analysis and GIS. With a background in geology and advanced training in ocean mapping, she supports expedition planning and survey operations, as well as marine data processing and management. Dr. Kailani Acosta is a science program associate at OceanX, focusing on ocean biogeochemistry, expedition planning, and high seas science frameworks. She holds a PhD in biological oceanography from Columbia University's Lamont Doherty Earth Observatory and a Bachelor of Science or Bachelor in Environmental Science from Brown University. Her work includes biogeochemical research, high seas MPA science under BBNJ, and UN Ocean Decade endorsed early career and shipboard program. She also serves as an early career liaison for the U.S. National Committee for the UN Ocean Decade. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Erin Heffron and Dr. Kailani Acosta. They'll be joining us on live.
We're still connecting to the audio right now, so can you hold for a bit?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, you can start now.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And I'm not turning on my camera because of the connection, but thank you all so much for being here. We're excited to be talking to you about mapping and oceanography from our 2025 mission. So my name is Kailani Acosta. I'm on the OceanX science team, and I'm a biological oceanographer. And I am talking to you all from New York. And I'm joined by Erin Heffron, who's our mapping and geospatial coordinator, who's an expert on all things bathymetry, and she is in Hawaii. So we're going to chat about mapping and understanding Timor-Leste's ocean environment, and specifically talking about bathymetry and oceanography. All right, next. So, in general, OceanX expeditions aim to study unexplored areas of the world's oceans with local experts to map and collect data on environmental characteristics of the watercolumn and seafloor. So, in order to do that, we focus on two: oceanography, and so oceanography covers biology, chemistry, physics, and microbes, all of the living and non-living pieces of water column that work together to try to understand the ocean as a whole. And acoustics covers both the seafloor itself, the water column, and below the seafloor. So in order to do that, we use multi-beam echo sounders, split beam echo sounders, acoustic Doppler current profilers, and sub-bottom measurements in order to learn more about these things. And Erin will tell you more about that in the next few slides. All right, next slide.
Okay, so thanks, Kailani. Getting right into it, we're going to start with bathymetry is the shape and the topography of the seafloor, and it really is the base data set and underlying data set that impacts pretty much every biological and oceanographic process in the ocean. It is the base data for everything. We do have estimates of what seafloor bathymetry looks like globally that are done from satellites, and you'll see some examples of that in later images. But only about 28, 29% of our seafloor has actually been mapped with direct measurements. It's more unknown than Mars. Most of the maps you see in things like Google are all from estimated bathymetry, and very little of that has been directly measured. We do know that bathymetry controls a lot of things about biological diversity. We know that seamounts and canyons and pretty much any topography on the seafloor can be an attractor for life. And that's something that I think is well known by fishermen for millennia, but that we as scientists also realize is happening. And so we know that when we see features that we're likely to find something there. The seafloor terrain also drives upwelling, mixing, and current. So it is driving the global oceanography that Kailani is going to talk about. And the thing that I think probably people think about maybe most directly for bathymetry, if they think about it at all, and something that's important, but maybe not the primary reason that we collect this data for scientific purposes, bathymetry is vital for navigation. People think about it for ship navigation, but for our operations, it's vital for ROV and sub-navigation. We need to know what the seafloor looks like so that we don't run aground with our equipment, and in shallow waters so that ships also have safe passage.
So oceanography is a fundamental piece of what we do when we create expeditions. So oceanography is the study of the physical, chemical, and biological features of the ocean, including its past, present, and future. So this means that we try to understand how all of these pieces come together to shape our global ocean. So I'll try to turn on my video, if that works. And so in thinking of what defines biology, we often look to temperature, salinity, and oxygen and nutrients. So these factors shape water masses and also tell us where things can survive. We also think about currents, which are shown here in this map. So there are currents that connect the global ocean not only to other ocean basins, but to themselves. So there are large-scale currents throughout the entire ocean. And in order to understand what kinds of organisms can live in certain places, we have to think about what currents connect each of those ocean basins, how they move, and how they move pollutants as well. And these boundaries that are defined by currents and temperature and salinity create invisible walls that allow for mixing or not, depending on the makeup of each water mass. And altogether, these baselines detect changes over time and space. So we can see if there is or ocean acidification or deoxygenation with climate change. Next slide. So why do bathymetry and oceanography matter? Put together, they are the foundation of how we put together expeditions at OceanX and across science more broadly. So we think about both bathymetry and oceanography when it comes to target selection, choosing exactly where we want to study and how we want to study a place, because bathymetry helps us to identify features, and the oceanography is used to describe the conditions of this environment or region. We also use it to provide biological context for each sample that we collect. So every sample that we collect, if it's a biological sample, has chemical and physical and substrate level information connected to it as well. And also, all of building larger scale monitoring. So our overall goal is to have large scale understandings of these systems that we study and repeat monitoring
Recording in progress.
The acoustics are floor and with and currents. So I'm sure Vincent might have touched on this a little bit about our methods and some of the things that we've done on this expedition. But to map the environment, we typically work with multi-beam echo sounders, which have a really wide swath, and use acoustics to get detections of the seafloor and tell us what the depth is, as well as information about the intensity. And we're going to turn off our camera. And targets here mean things like where they are in the water column. A sub-bottom profiler has this low frequency and so can penetrate the seafloor, and that gives us information about the layers that are underneath. And then finally, an ADCP, or acoustic Doppler current profiler, tracks positions of particles in the water column, and from really nice localized currents right where the ship is operating. So why is the bathymetry at Timor-Leste unique? As you guys probably know, you're in a really active part of the geologic world. There is.
For a moment?
Sure, I can pause.
Just got a message that.
We apologize for the inconvenience. We're trying to reconnect again. As we're trying to fix the connection, let's move to our next agenda. We now move to our next session. We'll hear the perspective of a Timorese participant in the exposition, Mr. Agustinho Rodriguez of the National Petroleum Authority. Agustinho Rodriguez is an environmental inspection and investigation officer at Timor-Leste's National Authority of Petroleum. A Fulbright scholar, he holds a master's degree in Geographic Information Science from the State University of New York at Albany and specializes in GIS, remote sensing, environmental assessment, and geospatial modeling. His work applies spatial technologies to biodiversity conservation, marine monitoring, land use planning, and energy development. He has held GIS and environmental roles across government, international consulting, the Asia Foundation, and academia, and has taught geology and petroleum studies at UNTL. Mr. Rodriguez, we would love to hear about your experience, what you learned, and how you can encourage greater Timorese participation in marine scientific research. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Agustinho Rodriguez.
Diak uluk na nain hau ni respeito ba Sua Excelência Primeiro-Ministro Karel Sarno Gusmau, hau respeito ba leader sirahotu iha sala idane no audiência sirahotu. Hanesan Timor hau preparahan desculpa preparahan slide nene uja inglês mas hau kule uja tetu atunune ita iha sala ne bele entende hotu diak nega hau Heta na oportunidade atu join Ocean X ba halo itan ini pesquisa iha itan itasi parte norte durante semana ruane laran aneson ohi introdução katak haunenia especialidade iha GIS ba mapeamento idane makau heta oportunidade idane tu irmai can you next please. Turma how se kule kono ba parte tolu how nini experiência nebe que how join Ocean X saída mak how aprende no importância saída mak Timor-Leste precisa halo atu nebele promove ita nenia recursos e hatasi no ikusliu maka ita oisa ita ni prioridade atu pesquisa e futuro idane maka parte importante nebe how se kule orsida. Next please. Ya how iane how to tujuet katak imagem idan he parte itebot sirne dia limang karuk ane haturu sala Ocean X nian kona ba mapeamento batimetria sira iha teknologia nebe avanço teves how serviço hamutu ko sira durante semana rua atu hatene det kona ba itenia tasiokos iha parte norte Timor ohin ita hareona sira nenia haturu mapeamento ita halo mapeamento hosi parte westenian to ilikisa no parte estenian to iha Los Palos ni sore ituang depois ita avança haleu iha ata ilha de Atauro durante semana rua nelaran imagem ida sorin ita botsina parte limalos ne expert na rua ne beke mi serviço mutu ka ajuda how hosu perguntas barak tebes atu ho intenção hatenelet konaba itanine condição tasiokos de Timor atu clarificaret ba ita iha ne katak itania parte tasi parte norte hosilha de Atauro ne cliente tebes nine profundidade ne to é 3.5 3 kilo e tal 3.500 metros e tal bahia ocos quando ita hambrik iha parte subaun, ne inclinação macas tebes, ou parte aturo inclinação macas tebes. Ita bot cara iha cor nebe purple nene, ne are nebe ke clean liu tebes, clean tebes. No hi are no banene iha flat itu ang hasan tetu kansa indikação ne tetu. Iha dili ho ata uru nene clarang nene isira bolu de si mountain ide neba. Então haturu mos itene estrutura bot nene hotu. Agora a imagem ide só. Go back to the previous slide, please. Okay, dia ita avança ba iha além de how heta oportunidade aprender Vincent Rasik mos ami iha sala ne haus perguntas barak basira para explicar sistema ne how mos iha oportunidade atu aprender litan kona ba unsa hatene iteninia condição tasi que tasi betasi ne hanusta. Então hare imagine segundo se tu bots limankaru how equipamentos na base da bolha CTD atu halo sukat kona ba condutividade temperatura no ninia tasi nuclear quando equipamentos ne hatun então nia começa fona imagem fona hasan a profiling baita atu ita tene tasi ninia condição a imagem na bahaturu how mak foti hela sample be iha imagem selfie ne ba cientista na ida hosi Australia na dua selo hosi na ida hosi US na dua selo hosi Australia ami halo how observa sir halo análise ba be na be iha depois ba iha ikusliu imagem ne halo colação ba be sample ser ne be que ita halo processo tiana. Então li hosi ida ne how aprende tamba ita hansa o introduz ita mo serviço iha a autoridade ba oil and gas então ita mos precisa hatene condutividade operador sira precisa ita precisa hare hotu mola operador ida bahalo sira nenia exploração ita nenia tasnimor. Next please. Ida nene how tecnicamente sala ida nene furak tebes sala Arovinian hasohem Vincent Colia remote operation vehicles nene equipamentos principais nebe que sir hatu batasi okos atu observa itania condição tasir okos ao mesmo tempo de observa siramos foti sample nebe que cientista se hanse itu sir hare iha itu ne limankaro sira nabane si hamrik serne cientista sira haturu amostra nebe que dia pasira tu halo analisa. Depois irne bahia wet lab nene laboratório nebe que cientista sira hamutu kutimor wan lubukida hosi universidade ita serviço mutu kosira atu hili amostra nebe diak ita tau pekin depois tau química preserva diak atu ne bala iha analisa laboratório nen atu highlight mos kata take away dos nen ROV nene importante tebes bato hatene itania condição tasi iha industria best practice quando iha oil and gas operação ruma atu environment nene ROV maksai ita relay makas ba ROV atu hatene itania condição iha tasi okos. Next please. Nudar Timoroan haune perspektiva kata iha parte hat nebe que ita atu investe hodi atu ne atu asa itene conhecimento ba hatene parte marenho hanesang ohi ita hosi alambio apresentona ita iha 10 years plano ba iha be tasinin nebe que estableciona interessado tebes ita iha una decreto lei de coleo con ba MSP Marine Spatial Planning durante ti semana rua nebe ho Oceanex amos toka ituan kon ba Marine Spatial Ocean Planning ida nene ita tu halo mapamento ida ba ita nena tas timor ita tu define katak recursos tasi hansan coral reef ne be amam barua ron ini dalang atau laos nebe estabelecimento ba força naval sini nebe irene tama hotu iha MSP niang. Nebe importante tebes. Nebe enforça itene plano rene importante tebes ba iha a desenvolvimento ba iha setor asaoin itenia abonana coleona katak atu hasa itenia blue economy. Itamos iha interessado foi em lá junho ita Sua Excelência Primeiro-Ministro lança ona blue economy website. Afir ita kontami website ita hare buat mesa furfura great kono ba ita netasi. Ba ida atu hasaitan ita nenia website ne ita update na fating ne mo se hasai kapasitasaung atu ne ema barak bel hatene kono ba ita nenia recurso tasi. E parte seluk cientista ho universidade siram sai masa tarjeto principal atu ne ita bel hasai kapasitasaung ba ema ne conhecimento batasi. Tuir hauninia conhecimento, tuir haunine a universidade nebe que estabelece ciência marinha agora maka UNTL. UNTL amimos ho docente lubukida ho professor estudante ne participa tu ya expedição OCDX ne durante semana rua si ita aprende buat lubukida nebe itamos iha decreto lei nebe que estabelece kona ba pesquisa ciência marinha nebe importante tebes atu hasai kapasitasaun cherne. E parte selo cansahin acolher atu estabelece MSP nebe ihaleten Marine Spatial Planning ita precisa hasai kapasitasaun técnico e a pesquisa GIS tian halo análise lili by spatial analysis nen. E parte selo sociedade civil ita tene sociedade civil a serviço basic ho comunidade ho itene. Então itamos bele hasai ita knowledge sharing ba siratu hatene kona ba recursos tasinian. Ba ia sociedade ia Timor ia sociedade barak nebe que hela ia parte costeira se depende máximo ba ia recursos tasi ba hatu muda ser namores. Então simos precisa promove sine conhecimento sine educação kona ba ita recursos tasi nebe que ia ona. Next please. Ini how tokai tuan ita bot sira hare iha polygon miang irma polygon miang he parte norte ida ne mak are ne bekke OceanX halo mapamento tiana. OceanX halo mapamento tiana ite iha ia linha polygon ne bekke parte sul no parte oeste e parte kusiniang. Mas atu clarifica kata polygon kinurida nene la representa itenia limite boundary by Timor niang tamba dadus ne hafoti hosi online sources nebe how tawhi legenda neba la representa legal boundary by Timor. Mabe atu clarifica que parte norte parte sul de Timor e tenemos bele science área pesquisa futuro ia oimai. Saída maka ita precisa halo ita precisa hetan dados neve baraktan atne ita preserva ita nenia tas Timor ne de diakleo ita quando hatene ita recurso Timor mag diakleo então ita intenção botebes ita interessado botebes loke ita Timoruan hotu ni Hanoi ato preserva ita netase. A parte seluk mos by oportunidade ita contente tebes sa ohin Vicendehang kata oportunidade quando butotu dia que het sirbel presença vale Timor iha tina gine lara irne importante tebes atu ita sai participação timornian atu join OceanX fai oportunidade ba malu atu ne sirmos bele aprende kono ba ita recurso tasi ita nenia tasi okos nene halosa. E parte seluk interessado tebes maka ita precisa aumenta tan bahia parte environment ambiente nian atu hasaitan ita pesquisa atu hatena ba qualidade benian qualidade sedimentos tasiokos nian ita atu hatena precisa hatena nia composição física química ou biológica. Ne importante tebes atunune ita bele iha daru sira nebe ita bele trekking na fating ita nudar ita hoto kampanya nudar Timoruang ita Timor iha mehibo tebes atu desenvolve setor luvukira nebe ita hetang daru sirahas nene importante lah lima ratu ne ita bela iha ita iha baseline ida atu hare kata ita ni ambiente nene manteng na fatinga o iha mudança depois de ita halo ita ni atividade ida. Ida ne macau ni apresentação hausu com licença. Não, obrigado, Wayne.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agustinho Rodriguez. We have been informed by the IT, apparently, due to high number of people are sharing hotspot. If you are currently turning on your hotspot, it interferes with the connection on the Starlink to connect to our speakers. How explico o te tundet. Tamba itabara cloque hela conexão hotspot, karik alguém estudante sira, e me share o colega sira hotspot, interfere tuang ho conexão. Tamane, sebele karik durante itani Zoom meeting, estudante sernebema cloque hotspot share ba colega sira itatakalai. Okay? Dali datang aling estudante sira. Tamba foi check a conexão, hotspot nini número asliu conexão internet. Bele usa internet normal, hotspot makita takalai. And now, to wrap up the presentation beforehand with Dr. Acosta and also just joining us online, I would like to welcome back Dr. Vincent to do a quick wrap up of the presentation. Dr. Vincent, time is yours. Ita si wrap up na besialo si Dr. Vincent para ho di continuare a apresentação ohing online. Okay, one moment, sure.
Sorry about that. We brought the presentation over. I'll just walk through it. Those poor people are sitting around and all over the world waiting to talk, but the internet connection is not treating us nicely. So I'm going to quickly go through what was the major findings that they were going to present. Just a couple of slides, but give you an idea of the flavor of what we saw. I think they're going to put it up here in a minute. So what you'll see is mapping. You'll see the oceanography. You'll see all this data. But as I mentioned, a lot of this, which now resides here in the country, requires kind of expert analysis and more work. And that is really what's ongoing. It takes, like I said, years to see this data come to light. And what you saw also on the map that it showed, Alfonso just showed you, there are large regions of your water that have yet to be mapped and yet to be studied. So hopefully in the future we'll be able to come back and finish that. The mapping in this area was particularly difficult, not pretty difficult, but when it's shallow, it's actually much more work. When you're deeper, you can map larger swaths of ocean. So what we could do in the south, where it's much deeper, we could map a much larger portion of the of your EZ in a shorter period of time. Are we live yet? No, still loading. Apologies for this. What I would say is that we organized this expedition. We had a very brief period of time in our schedule that was free, that became free very late in the year. I immediately talked to our team and I said, my heart wants to take us to Timor-Leste. Can we do this in such a short time? Normally, these expeditions last longer and take a year or so to develop. But we reached out to the government, and thanks to the wonderful support, we were able to undertake this short expedition as a bit of a test expedition, but in a short period of time. Hopefully the next one will have a little more time to develop exactly what we do together and bring the scientists both locally and from overseas to come and work here. This is me just filling space. I could tell jokes now about, funny thing happened in the United States. I just left the U.S. a day and a half ago to come here, which is, I can't extol enough the virtues of having a leader like you have for your country. So, congratulations. And keep democracy alive and well in your country. It's obviously vital. So, congratulations on that. Nothing yet, huh? No. Here we go. Getting closer. So after this, after Timor, I'll travel to Palau, where they're having the Pacific Island Forum, which is all the Pacific Islands. We're going to be talking there. We just finished an expedition in Palau, which is also very beautiful and very nice. Bravo. Thank you. Here we go. So we're not going to go through all the gory details of the science, but I did want to talk a little bit about the different types of stuff that we collected here in the waters and where it will lead and why it's important. So on the left is something we call multi-beam echo sounders. This is a piece of equipment on the ship, which is remarkable, really. It is a sensor that sends out around 500 beams of sound, very focused beams of sound, to the bottom of the ocean floor. Unless you're directly under the vessel, you could barely hear these. These beams go down and they reflect off the ocean floor, sound. But they create a kind of a swath underneath the boat, basically a line of depth differences. And then that, as the vehicle moves across, it produces these kind of 3D relief maps, which look like terrain maps on the shore. So we did the detailed mapping, and there we'll show a little bit of that. And that also allows us to put our vehicles in the water and go down without them, knowing where they're going, finding spots where we can go to. That's an enormous piece of real estate that's shown there. The other ones are split beam echo sounders, and these are things which track biological communities in the water column. So it's a different set of sonars, and those sonars look at life that exists in the water column. So what you can see actually on that picture is the green material there is probably fish. It picks up the swim bladders of fish, so you can see populations of fish moving through the column. You can also pick up the large diurnal migration of organisms. The final thing that we used over here was something called a sub-bottom profile. That's a different sonar system that allows the sonar to penetrate the ocean floor and gives you information about what's beneath the ocean floor. So that's interesting in terms of minerals, in terms of petroleum deposits, things like that. So that data was also collected. And finally is this very interesting piece of equipment called an acoustic Doppler current profiler. An acoustic Doppler current profiler is also a sonar system, but that sonar system allows you to determine water movement under the ship. It shows how water moves underneath the ship. So we took these measurements throughout your area, so there's a tremendous amount of information about how water is moving in the deep ocean. The shallow is easy to see as currents, but underwater things can move in different directions. Next slide. So all of this data was collected through this entire area. Next. Let's see if we go. Okay. So why is it so unique, the bathymetry of this area? So what you're seeing there is Timor. You're seeing the Timor Trough. You're seeing the Wetar Thrust, and you're seeing the area in between. And your country lies in the middle of a very important area. It's a collision of the Australian plate, as I'm sure you're all aware, and the Eurasian plate and the Banda volcanic ridge. That's what makes this area so volcanically active. The south coast is a subduction trough and an excretatory prism. Rock and sediment scraping off the subduction plain is the Timor Trough. You have some of the deepest water in the world in the south of this area and south of Java. The north coast, the back arch, is a thinned and stretched plate forming a deep Wetar basin, which is what you have between Timor and the island chains of Indonesia and Aurora Island. So it's a very robust area, very unique to have shallow and deep water all represented, and lots of water flow. And lots of water flow means a lot of life, which helps explain why there's so much life in this area. Next slide. So this purple area is the area that we covered with our multi-beam in your waters. So essentially map the entire north shore of all of your EEZ. Everything around Futuru Island all the way to Dili, and everything all the way east. Everything that's pink in that area now has high-resolution multi-beam mapping, which is available. It's about 6.5%, though, believe it or not, of your EEZ, because most of your EEZ, as you know, exists in the southern part of the island. So that large area on the bottom is not yet mapped, largely not mapped. There's some small portions. We have a proposal into the government at the moment to return and map that entire area for you, so you have your entire EEZ mapped. There's also, as you know, right, that'd be great, right? It's actually, believe it or not, because of the difference in depth, it's easier for our ship to map deeper water because the beam spreads out as you go deeper. So we could map, in the same period of time it took to map that purple area, we could map this entire area in a matter of a few weeks. So we'd have maps for you of all that. Also, as you're well aware, there's a portion of your EEZ that extends into the western part of the island, and that could also be easily mapped, as well as any of the areas in the west. So that is up to the government to approve for that in the future. But so far, we've only done 6.5%, but it's 3,000 plus kilometers of the water column. So in that area, it's quite deep, right? So it's special sonar systems that are capable of doing that measurement. And we collected about 1,700 kilometers of sub-bottom profilers. So for those in the audience that are interested in the geology and the geochemistry of the area, there's a lot of information in that data, and we'd be glad to work with you. All that data is in the hands of the government now. Next slide. So you still have a large part of your EEZ that could still be mapped, which we'd be glad to provide in the future. Oh, here comes the next one. Great. There it is. So newly mapped areas are shown on here. There's about 3,600 square kilometers of newly mapped, adding coverage to 6 planned or existing MPAs. So the planned or existing marine protected areas in your country are marked as those orange boxes. And the areas that were mapped, you see the color relief of the various areas. It's difficult to see in the picture, but the shallow waters are in one color, and as you get deeper, they get deeper. And that difference is around 3,000 feet. It's about 3 kilometers depth out there in the water. And the whales, as you know, move through this area here. Post-processed data, full resolution data, will be available soon. The full resolution that we processed of this will be available in December from us to give over to the government. All the raw data has already been provided. And we will contribute whatever you allow us to contribute, if you request it, to the JEBCO and the 30 by 30 database that exists in the world. So that's really up to your government to decide what would like to make available. Next slide. Oh, slow. It's moving. Oh, there we go. So this is a better map of the area, a better color-coded map of it, showing you a couple of things. One is on the top is depth in color, as I mentioned. So the lighter is sort of being the light pink all the way down to the deep, which, as you can see, is 3,390 meters in that area, quite deep and very close to shore. Between Dili and Arturo, there's areas just east of it that are quite deep, which is very deep. Most countries do not have that. The U.S. has very little of that water in its EEZ, that depth, to be honest with you. Most of it is 1,000, 2,000 meters. Another very interesting part of this is on the bottom, the data is presented in a slightly different way. What we do is we take, as it's going down the shore, we color code those parts of the map where the slope is the highest. What that means is the sharpest drop-off. So what you see in that area, from red to pink, are drop-offs. So there's some very significant cliffs and drop-offs in there, which is where you find all the life. This is the kind of work that we do in order to go down and look for where life might exist. Next slide. It's between 30 and 3,400 meters of depth. So quite a depth. I don't know if this is probably a video, right? We probably shouldn't run that. Let's skip that. Unfortunately, maybe we'll get it together for the afternoon and show it to you. Yeah. These are really cool fly-through videos. I'm sorry they're not running. But so, for example, from the insights from the bathymetry are the fact that you find spots. For example, in the color-coded is how the map looks. And we picked locations. Those little lines there are where the ROV goes down. So these are vast areas of ocean that we did not observe, but we have to pick areas that we're going to send the ROV, and those little spots are where we went down with the ROV and sampled. So it's only a tiny fraction of this area that we actually visited. And look, lo and behold, what sits down in the deep depths of your water. Now, you have thousands of species of corals in your shallow water. Some of those are in the mesophotic, but not all of them. There are new ones in the mesophotic. There's an equivalent level of diversity in the mesophotic and the deep reef as there is in the shallow reef, and many of them are different species. So a lot of what you see down at depth, you don't see in shallow. So a whole different life down in the deep. Next dive. Next slide. That's an ROV dive, and that's a second ROV dive. So you're only covering a very small part of the area with the ROVs. Oh boy. So this is a really cool picture. This is a picture from the midwater sonar systems. And what this shows is, if you look there from the top is the surface of the water, and down below all of these lines are the seafloor, and in it you see this area here. I'm going to walk over. Plankton, fish, all the things in the deep water that are necessary to sustain life in your water column. Tons of stuff in the water column here that keep everybody happy, including the whales, which feed on the material that we see in the shallow water. I got to keep going quickly, unfortunately. I can talk too much. Next one. Oh, then I can walk. Yeah, there we go. I can walk. Thank you. I can move around a little bit. I can't talk too much longer. They're cutting me off and yelling at me. Okay. So why is this interesting and important? To tell you that what you have in your waters is something called an upwelling. I love this guy. When you have these mountains and these rises in your water column, you have water moving along and hits it, and there's a lot of nutrient in the deep, and that brings nutrient to the shallow water. And that's the nutrient that whales love, that the corals love, that the fish love. That's why you have fishing grounds in the area. So all of the nutrient material that's on these seamounts in these areas is part of the migratory plan that goes upwards and which feeds the shallow water reef and communities. So if there's damage, the fisheries are impacted by that, which is why the deep connectivity is very important. Next slide. No more. She's telling me no more slides. That's it. She's a runner. You don't want to hear this anymore. Anyways, last picture. Beautiful. Could go on for hours. We'll leave the presentation. Beautiful. Thank you. Look at that. I could go on for hours about the science. It's very cool. We have someone coming up next. That's why I'm out? No. Lunch. Oh, I don't want to stand between us and lunch. We can talk at lunch. Thank you all.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. Excelência Sira, bele turla laishlei, desi apresentação da saída. Thank you very much, Dr. Vincent. And before we break for our lunch, let's welcome back Les Yaval Dance Group for another cultural dance performance. Então, mai te vasaliva hodisi un filofali Les Yaval. Wewiku Hali. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Obrigado ang grupo dança rua Lezeval no Wewiku Hali. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, it is now our time for lunch. We hope you enjoy. Once again, for our members of government, diplomatic corps and speakers, lunch is at the back. Para participantes sira hototo, estudantes sira, na fating itaninia lunch provided here. Please also enjoy coffee at the coffee garden after your lunch. Bon appetit. We'll see you again at 2 p.m. Itasormalu Tukurua. Obrigado.
Dores Radio Televisão Timor-Leste, idanemak simpósio nebe ita hoto acompanha ona, hahusi início toramata. Usi simpósio ne iha objetivo principal maka simpósio ne sehare resultado científico hirak nebe, bele aplica ba prática hori apoio economia azul Timor-Leste ninian. Nomos apoio economia Timor-Leste ninian ba futuro. Tamane telespectadores Radio Televisão Timor-Leste. La bele haksumi kang husi canal RTTL ninian. Hori acompanha a informação seluk depois de se fila família mais segmentos terceiro ninian. Obrigado.